One of the most important components of a company is the one that is not internal to the company, like the management, and that is the board of directors. A board of directors can be anything from a bunch of your friends to a series of investors or external people. My experience has been that they are a tremendous resource if you choose your board of directors carefully. So the first thing that they do, of course, is hire and fire the executive staff, including especially the CEO. Because the CEO doesn't work for the company, works for the board of directors, in all practical purposes. So if a CEO is not doing his job, it's the board of directors that will put him away.
Okay. How can a well-constructed board of directors act as a company's competitive advantage rather than just a legal requirement?
I can give you that perfectly from experience. Boards of directors, if you're very careful in choosing them, have a lot of influence in two areas. One is in finance. People who put in a lot of money in the company will often ask for a board seat. So they're very good at that for when it comes to the next round of financing. The other is they are often very experienced in the business world in general. So they can provide you with information on how to run your company, but they can also make contacts for you. And ours have been wonderful at that. We've been very careful in choosing our boards. I want to share with you something that I've been working on for a long time that is very important to me, and that is a Discord channel for business. On it, there will be a lot of free information, but also access to me. So you can have the ability to ask me questions, and I can respond to your particular problems and difficulties, and also help you get started. I'm really looking forward to being able to interact with you individually on there. I look forward to seeing everybody on there, and I will be waiting for you. Now, let's get back to our video.
Why is it critical to have a board member who challenges the CEO rather than just supports their vision?
We've all seen the case where the CEO is given lots of options because his friends are on the board and things like that. There's nobody checking him, and that's a really bad idea. A good board of directors isn't an opponent of the CEO, but is checking to make sure that he's doing the best job, he or she is doing the best job possible.
So you're saying don't hire your friends as your board directors?
You may have to at the very beginning, but they should know that they're going to be replaced when you can get somebody that's, well, better.
Is it because of the friendship, or is it because they're afraid to tell the CEO what to do?
It's both of those things, but the most important is that they're lacking experience. They're lacking experience generally, unless you happen to have, Bill Gates as your friend. They're lacking experience that you need to bring in, and that you're wasting a slot if you have a board of directors member who's not providing that.
What's the minimum years of experience a board director needs to have?
Well, generally they're having experience in business, not in being on boards, although all of ours have had pretty good experience with boards. I don't think I've ever had anybody with less than 20 years of experience in the business world. Or the finance world, if they're the finance person.
Have you ever seen a company that had a board director or a board member that was less than 20 years and affected the company in a negative way?
I've seen board members that were deadwood. In other words, there was no reason for them to be on the board. Let me turn this off entirely. I've seen board of directors who were deadwood. In other words, that they didn't bring anything useful to the company. And of course, they occupied space that could have been occupied by somebody who knew what they were doing. And yes, I've seen that several times, especially early on in the company.
So early on in the company, if you need to seek out the dead woods in order to thrive?
No, you often will. First of all, you'll bring in you and your partners will be on the board to start with. Well, if you're a new entrepreneur, you don't know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. I mean, let's be honest, you don't know what you're doing. And so that you want to replace yourselves as quickly as possible. You're on the board because somebody's going to be on the board, and the board's got to function. But with time, you want to replace yourself and everybody else, except for the CEO. He's almost always on the board.
I see. All right, perfect. What are the biggest mistakes first-time entrepreneurs make when selecting a board member, and how can they avoid these pitfalls?
I have seen this 100 times in my career. They're going to try to run my company. Well, yes and no. You're hiring them to run your company in the sense of the legal sense. But no, these people have lives. They want to do other things too. But they will provide you with the information that you need, the mentorship that you need, the guidance that you need, and the connections that you need.
Beautiful. In what way do board members shape a company's long-term strategy, and how do their decisions impact a day-to-day operation?
Probably their real job can be characterized as affecting the long-term future of the company. Not only in the sense of what it does as far as the market is concerned and the products that it's bringing out, but the ultimate sale of the company or public offering of the company, because they are the ones with experience in those areas. And I have been very successful in having board of directors with that kind of experience.
So, question for you, Dave: how long should a company be in business in order to bring a board, basically a board?
An external board that has characteristics that you want. It depends. If your founders are relatively well connected, so after your first company or two or three, you know a lot of people, and you can go to them, people with experience, perhaps former board members, and either have them or bring in other people. So by the time we got around to Aletheon, we had long-term financiers, we had the number 3 person in Boeing, we had a bunch of other things like that a new entrepreneur is not going to be able to do. But how did we get there? We got there by building it step by step of contacts.
So you're saying it took you approximately 10 years, or?
No, well, I would say that within 10 years of my first company, we were able to hire the board of directors that we wanted. But even in my first company, we had an absolutely first-rate venture capital firm that was backing us. So we got most of that through them.
I see.
We're really blessed by our venture capitalists.
So do you think you got lucky?
No, we were really careful. We, in fact, long story, we fired our previous investors and / board and went with the new set because we thought the other ones were wrong, and they were wrong. They thought that we should raise a little bit of money, but we saw a recession coming, and we said no. So we fired them. We went to one of the premier venture firms, actually 3 of the premier venture firms in Silicon Valley, and all 3 of them invested in us. And that proved to be a tremendous benefit.
Did you ever ask another company's advice for maybe a questionable board member that you had decision that he was trying to make, or is it your experience in business that helps you navigate through basically a bad decision?
Obviously, the primary characteristic is your own experience in business. However, obviously, you're also starting out, so you may not have that experience. Neither really. You always work out a personal relationship with members of the board. And you often can go to them privately and say, I'm not sure about what's going on here. Can you enlighten me? And if you trust them and they're trustworthy, then you get all the benefits of going outside. And you plant the seed in a board member's ear that maybe something ought to be watched.
Oh. And if you feel like somebody needs to be watched, wouldn't you just feel comfortable to fire them? Because if you can't trust your board, then how can you trust them to make decisions?
You don't have the authority to fire a board.
You don't?
No, the shareholders, the board is elected by the shareholders.
So wouldn't you select it or have a meeting and then discuss it in private?
Yes. I have never, yes I have. I have once fired a board member. He was the representative of our lead investor, and he simply did not know what he was doing. Mm-hmm. And my opinion was he did not belong. And finally, we discussed it internally. Mm-hmm. And I had the relationship with the lead investor because I had worked for him, and that's why he followed us in with money. And I went to him, I said, this guy's not doing you any favors by being on the board. You need this guy on the board. And he said, aye, sir, and put that guy on the board who's still on the board and is a wonderful contributor to the company. You do that, but none of this appears on paper anywhere. You do this all by discussions behind the scene. A similar thing that happens to that is, let's say the CEO is screwing up. And as a founder, I have rarely been the CEO. I don't want to be. I want to be the technologist. That's where my expertise is. If I listen to another sales presentation, I'll kill somebody. But I still have influence and power in that. So in 3 cases, 3 times, I have been primary in getting a CEO removed because he wasn't doing his job, or he was doing it very badly, or he was causing other problems within the company. And the way that in all 3 cases, the way I did that is I and often other members of the executive staff went to the board privately and talked to the chairman, usually the chairman, and said, this is the problem we've got. All 3 cases, they had already been having that discussion among themselves. Because they had seen it too, but didn't know that because who we support, the executive staff, is extremely important to the board of directors. And making sure that you're on the same page with the board of directors is very important. That's what the private relationship helps with.
Understood. How does the power dynamic between a CEO and their board evolve as the company grows from a startup to an enterprise?
Ideally, and this is true much of the time, maybe even most of the time, ideally they're on the same page. They just have different abilities and different knowledge bases. The CEO's primary job is presenting the company to the external world. The board of directors have contacts in finance and in business separate from the company itself. So they're part of the same team and they're working together. On top of that is always, of course, the fact that the CEO works for the board.
Understood. So do you, and this is a question directly to you, Dave, do you think the CEO sometimes feels threatened by the board members?
Yes, sometimes with some justification. Excuse me. Yes, because the CEO, of course, works for the board. That's the group of people that he or she needs to most please. So yes, they often do, but that's almost always the wrong attitude to have. If you have a board that you can't work with and you're competent, you can usually convince that board member to go away. Mm-hmm. You can't fire them because they're elected by the shareholders, but you can get your way other ways.
Well, and then,
like I did.
And then I have another question that correlates with you firing 3 CEOs. Mm-hmm. How should a founder handle a situation where the board wants to replace him as a CEO?
My attitude, and I have never been in that situation, but one of my partners was on my first company, and the condition of the major round of financing was that he would be replaced. Not that he would be fired, he wasn't, but that he would be replaced as CEO. He completely agreed with it because he's got his stock. Regardless of the fact that he's been replaced as CEO, he still holds the stock options, he's still vesting them by staying with the company. So he's going to make money if the company is successful, and he wants to optimize the chances of the company being successful. Sure, there's some ego hit, but any rational person is going to say, I'll be better off if somebody like this is running the company than if I am.
Mm-hmm. So to determine if a CEO is good, you determine, you basically test him through hardship, and most importantly, to know that the CEO ego doesn't get in the way of letting him have a successful company. And
the standing joke, there's 2 things that CEOs have in abundance: good hair and an ego. Mm-hmm. But yes, the answer is if and I've had this where the CEO's ego was driving his actions and we're hurting the company. Mm-hmm. And yes, you get rid of them if you can. Now we were told that if we participated in firing the CEO within a year, we would probably be gone, even if there was a new CEO. That proved not to actually be true, but I can understand that it might be, because the new CEO wouldn't trust you because they of course know what happened. Mm-hmm. But I've never had that happen because it was obviously, in all 3 cases, obvious that the guy had to go.
Yes. So you basically presented a case, and the case had the facts of why this X person is a bad CEO, and the next CEO would see this.
And because in all 3 cases I was the senior founder, I had the largest shareholder, I had influence with the board. Yes. And the board listened. So remember I said the board is hired by the shareholders. Well, I was the largest shareholder, so I did have some influence.
Alrighty, Dave, and I believe that's all the questions that I have. If you want to leave a little bit of input
I
as
do, and that is people are afraid that the board is somehow going to interfere with them doing their job as a company. If you're doing a good job with the company, that's not going to happen. They would much rather sit back and point that maybe you can do this, maybe you should do that, and things like that, and not work very hard for because they get shares. They get shares of stock almost always, and not work very hard for those shares of stock. But there can be tremendous benefits to you even not working very hard. Build a good relationship with your board and build a good board of directors. Don't rush to get people. Take the time to find the best you possibly can.
and for the young entrepreneurs that are just starting their ventures, you would say how many years of experience in business that they need to have in their own company before they fully take to pull the trigger on a full board?
I mean, before they would be competent to choose a board?
Yes.
Probably 10 years
10 years of
business experience. Of getting the rough edges knocked off of you and of understanding how markets work and how companies work and so forth like that. Now, if you're lucky, you're bridging that period with really good financiers. If you're doing it on your own, you're dancing, you're walking on a tightrope without a net. But you can be successful that way. I mean, many people like say Steve Jobs did exactly that and did it very successfully. That's not to say it can't be done. I'm just saying on the average, that's not the right way to do it.
perfect. Alrighty, Dave. Thank you so much for letting me know the importance of having board members.
If you liked this and enjoyed it, please like and turn on notifications and subscribe. And see you next time.